And then Trista, again, if you could look out for people, but I'm gonna go ahead and share screen. So again, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this morning. Jesse Benron with the Orange County Business Council. We're the regional convener for this grant that I'll be talking about. And again, I hope to be very quick. Then there's going to be time for questions. I'll send, of course, this recording and the slide deck as a recap. But primarily, this is just to establish a baseline about what this grant is, what SURF is. So Deborah, thank you for joining. I think this may not be worth your time, but I always appreciate it. But for others, we want to establish the baseline because many of you received an invitation a couple weeks from now where we're presenting a full report to you. You'll actually get the draft in advance if you want to peruse at your leisure. Probably great 4th of July reading, I'm sure. And then that way, again, you're more familiar and we're not kind of spending that time explaining what you're looking at or what this whole thing is about. So with that, let me go ahead and share my deck here. Let me put it into presentation mode. So just confirming, can people see my deck? Everything looks good? Okay, so this is, again, the Community Economic Resiliency Fund, SURF. For now, at least, the state has told us that they're probably going to rebrand this, which is kind of bizarre, but I mean, we take our orders from the state, I guess. So just for now, though, it's Community Economic Resilience Fund, SURF, and then we'll let you know kind of how that transition works. But that's what we're going to be talking about today. As you can imagine, Community Economic Resiliency Fund is a mouthful, so you'll just hear me refer to SURF moving forward. So what is SURF? Here is verbatim kind of from the SFP. And it's primarily, again, an economic development planning, but also implementation because there are going to be projects tied to this planning. But with, as you can see, some words are bolded here: equitable, sustainable, long-term economic resiliency, carbon neutral economy. These are going to be kind of values or tenets to this economic development plan, which I'm sure many of you, especially at the city level, are probably working towards a lot of these things as well as value. So equitable, I think we all know what that means, right? There are people who are doing well in Orange County, others who are not and historically have not. How do we make sure that these projects can build greater equity in our economy? Sustainable, in the sense of environmental, as we all know, the state of California is kind of on the vanguard of making sure that we have a sustainable economy and addressing climate change. And then economic resiliency is to point out that there are some industries and jobs or occupations that, regardless of the broader macroeconomic picture, just fare better than others. And so we want to focus on what those opportunities are, and that this plan and these investments aren't for jobs that might go away in a relative snap because of some economic shock. So again, economic development plan and projects is probably the big picture, but know that if it doesn't have these values, it's not going to be consistent with what the state wants to see. So with the economic development plan, that's what we're currently doing. We primarily have to do 3 things, and that is we have to create a high road transition collaborative. I will refer to as an HRTC, and I will explain kind of what is the HRTC. We have to develop a regional economic plan. It's very much as the state has drafted this SFP, and I can give you a full one as well as a summary of the SFP after this as well. But I think the CEDS, or the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, I think all of you are familiar with. It's very based in structure, at least. Again, I have to go back to they have specific values they want to see, and maybe certain data sets, but ultimately the idea of data, the idea of strategies, and then the idea of even recommended projects are very consistent with the most recent CEDS document Orange County has. And then I think the big thing, and the most important thing, is these strategic investments and projects that can come from this. And so this isn't just a phenomenal planning exercise, but it actually means jobs. It actually means investment from the state to do some of these things. So that's, in a nutshell, we're working on these things. These 3 things take a lot of time, as you can imagine, but to distill it down, these are the objectives of what SURF is. So the High Road Transition Collaborative, as I mentioned in the previous slide, is primarily just like the executive committee, the decision-making body with balanced representation as best as possible from all these groups. And I'm not going to go through every group. I'll show you a little bit of the website that we have up where we'll list everybody, but labor organizations, Orange County Labor Fed, the building trades, employers, with employers specifically like SoCalGas, but business associations like the Hispanic Chamber, grassroots CBOs. That's very much United Way. There's a group called like Thrive Santa Ana, right, which is a community land trust in Santa Ana. So it's regional, but also very localized. Government agencies, the Orange County Workforce Association, First Five, they're involved. Economic development agencies, some of your counterparts like the city of Garden Grove and the city of Santa Ana are involved in this process. Philanthropic organizations, the Orange County Community Foundation, Orange County grant makers, education training providers, there are community colleges involved. There's UCI, there's Cal State Fullerton, and the list goes on. So this big group is about actually 75 people or entities, and that is the large group that will make these decisions in a collaborative manner to ensure that more voices are at the table than have probably traditionally been done in previous economic development plans, certainly regional economic development plans. So the regional plan part one, what needs to be in it, and as I mentioned, this next meeting, or the meeting that you've all received calendar invites for mid-July, is to look at this plan and to provide input into this plan. But it's top line regional summary, the economy and economic development, where has the economy come from in Orange County? Where is it heading? If there are inequities, where are the inequities? Maybe some analysis on why they exist. Climate and environmental impact, because there's inequities there. And then public health analysis. This SURF originally was supposed to start almost immediately after COVID, or once COVID subsided. However, some time has elapsed since the state kind of got their arms around how to execute this grant. So there's some public health analysis as well, but I would say that probably the first two are probably the most important. There's a stakeholder mapping. I think actually a lot of cities actually completed the stakeholder map, which is wonderful. And that is just an understanding of when we think about a more equitable, sustainable, and resilient economy, who are the players? And as cities, if many of you are cities, you are doing that. Some CBOs are doing that. Philanthropy is putting money towards that. The workforce boards are doing stuff around that. So that's what the stakeholder map is best as we can. I think it's always going to be an iterative thing because there's always groups coming in, and the more the word gets out about the stakeholder map, I think the more it'll grow. But it could be a resource as you think about the things that you're working on. Well, what other partners are there that could help us accomplish these things? And I think all of you know labor market analysis, industry cluster analysis, and SWOT analysis. So that will also be in the report as well. Then we have the data done, and then we move to what are the strategies. Now that we have the data and we all more or less agree on the data, well, how do we use that data to make some of these decisions? And that is what the HRTC will probably drive a draft of. And then this is where I think we'll convene this group again, considering that you're such a significant stakeholder, that you could then provide input into this process as well to try to make sure that the document is as accurate as possible. And then it'll be finalized through the HRTC. So sorry, let me go back here. As you saw through the HRTC categories, right, a lot of you are representing economic development agencies or government agencies. That's the purpose of this call. We're having similar calls with all of these different stakeholder groups. So labor is coming together, although not everyone within labor, as you can imagine, there are hundreds of different labor unions or at least dozens, maybe even 100 in Orange County. You can't get everyone on the HRTC. You just can't make decisions that way. So that is the opportunity for more labor organizations who are not sitting on the HRTC to be involved. As in this case, you are not sitting on the HRTC, but your involvement is critical. We want to expand the input of the group. Some people will ultimately have to make the decisions, others are making the decisions, but we do want to expand the input from the group since this will impact you. So let me then go over here. So then after we have the strategies and they're all laid out, then we have to start looking for projects that meet those strategies that we have agreed to and set out upon. And so I think this is where it's most exciting. You don't want to get ahead of yourself because the other two things lead to this, that if you do the other things incorrectly or sloppily, then they may make certain projects ineligible. And so this is I think the most important, but again, we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. And that now there are two directions in which the state can go. So I'll explain both. It's currently in public comment. the public comment phase, but I still wanted to show both just so everyone really who's concerned with this or wants to know more can be informed. And this was the original approach. The original approach was that there was $450 million competitively statewide. So Orange County is doing this, but so are 12 other, what the state calls regions, are doing the same process. All of us would compete for $450 million to build or to actually have funding for projects that can do the things that align with our strategies, that are demonstrated equity, state climate goals, support job quality, that clearly have community support given this process, especially from the HRTC. That's already a pretty broad group, but because we're doing these stakeholder convenings, there's even more, at least community awareness about what these things could be. And another important thing is to complement existing funding. That is to say, like many projects or grants, you don't want to ask for $20 million for a $20 million project. The state will think that stronger projects, have other funding available, whether it's other grants, whether it's federal, whether it's a different agency of the state that wants to fund it, whether there's, business or other philanthropy that wants to fund it as well. Obviously, money proves support as well. So if there's other funds, this makes it a kind of a stronger proposal. Now, I will say that as I move into that, this is the original plan. The state is looking to pivot to this one, but sorry, let me just go back. A good example, and as you can see, it's blue, so it's hyperlinked to where when I share the deck with you, you could look at not only a brief definition, or sorry, a brief description of this project, but also some of the other projects that were funded. The state did a kind of pilot project earlier on in the year before really like this whole thing could really get started. And so we did have a winner in Orange County, and here's just a little bit about the project itself. But as I mentioned, if you click on this link after I send this slide deck out, you'll be able to see some of the other regions that won. And it's a project in Santa Ana with driven by 3 community-based organizations. And it speaks to many of the pillars that SURF is all about, right? So BIPOC farmers, there's equity, there's cooperative, so there's access from the workers also own the space, but it's also has ability to sell local produce, and it's all locally sourced, as you can imagine, with the urban farm. So it's food sustainability, it's healthy food, but it's also from an economic standpoint, a lot of equity. And they also had, again, kind of buy-in from, as a key partner, the city of Santa Ana itself. So there was, again, city support for this. And lastly, as another bullet point, was they went out in the community and really, before they even came up with this idea, it was driven by the community. They did canvassing and they found that these were the needs of the community. And so this project, again, was funded $3.8 million. That's just an example of the projects when we go to the fuller implementation phase that we can be moving towards. And so if you want to not make this so abstract, this is one that could give you an idea of what would be solid projects throughout Orange County, and of course, asking for significantly more funds. This was just one project. The tricky thing is that now the state is looking to shift. And so if the state were to move forward with this plan, the previous one that I mentioned was $450 million, does get reduced down to $100 million. However, $26.5 million is then guaranteed to Orange County, but to do specific things. And I've linked right here to the webpage of the Catalyst Fund. As I mentioned, it's in the public comment phase. So if you are interested, feel free to review and send in your comments. They're even, they're going to host a webinar on July 5th. That information should kind of be somewhere as you kind of click on that. So that's just so again, so you can click through to explain more. But this pivot, again, may not be a terrible thing because it guarantees Orange County this amount of money. And these are the things that we can do with it. They have varying levels of how much we could spend at each one of these things, but it's pretty much structured as more traditional economic development. The other one, as you can imagine, those were all the details I had, which meant it could have been a lot of things hypothetically. Here, the state wants to guarantee funding, but also be more prescriptive. And if they go this way, then that's just how it is. But it's more focused again around sustaining the HRTC for the decision-making ability, but it wants to develop industry collaborative so the HRTC will decide what the top 3 industry of opportunities are. So there's a huge workforce development component as well. But as you go down, you have to identify specific parcels. So there's fundings there to say, well, yeah, this would be a great industry and we're already doing a lot in this industry, but if we can't put them anywhere, then we can't really we're really doing all this work for naught. And so there's money set aside for us to try to find where is the best place to kind of put these businesses if they continue to grow in Orange County, or if they would be recruited into Orange County. Another one is to develop a revolving loan fund. This would be up to $5 million for small companies based on those industries. So really the selection of those industries are critical. And so I think, as you look at the report in a future meeting, I think it'd be helpful to get all of your feedback on what you think the top 3 industries should be for Orange County to focus on. And then lastly, there's $1 million available for an anchor institution that could hypothetically be shut down or might be looking to relocate in order to keep them there. Not sure how much that would apply to Orange County. I guess we would see. One example of why this was pretty much brought on was, I think some of you might have heard the news, like there was a hospital that was going to close down in Madera, and then it would have just flooded every other kind of small medical center with the patients who would have went there. And so with some of the money, they were able to save that, not with this money, but money like it, to save that hospital. And that's what they were thinking about when they kind of included this clause. But that's kind of how this $26.5 million would be spent. I think one thing that would be great, I would recommend that you go towards, and let me try to stop share and then toggle over to them, is this 2 resources just to stay up to date. Give me one moment. Are the website itself, and I won't scroll through the whole thing, but on the website, you'll see the end of the list of everyone on the HRTC. I think it gives a fuller, as I mentioned, there's a summary of what CERF is. There's even past notes from past meetings. But I think what's most interesting is this OC open data site. And this is, again, available to you. But this is really, a data repository and a way for you to kind of do research directly. It's with Esri, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with and do. And I think the 2 biggest things, so there's a lot here that I think you could all click through. You could browse whole data sets by category and see how it kind of applies to your community. And there's some additional resources down here. So I think I always let people explore at your own leisure. If you have questions, by all means, I think you all have my emails by now, circle back, and then we can try to get your questions answered. This is supposed to be a tool for the HRTC. Oh, it's been a tool for the researchers. It's a tool for the HRTC if they want to do their own kind of exploration. But also through this, we want to make this public. So again, all of you could look at this as a tool. And I think, of any stakeholder group, I'm sure, you would be the most interested in some of these things and the data sets that are now publicly available to you. But with that, let me just jump into some more important things. So why, for those of you who are cities, why you were asked to kind of join this, and not everyone was, but here's just a map of, if there's some color here, it means that you have a disinvested community by definition. So when we talk about equity, the state has defined communities by its census tract, and that there are varying levels of definition. And in another kind of tab, we can kind of go through some of those definitions. But this is to show you that if you're kind of color coded here, you have, in one way or another, one disinvested census tract. And the darker the color, the more intense. And so just for example, we can go to Santa Ana, because it's in the center, that 44% of Santa Ana census tracts is defined as disinvested by the state. La Habra is high. Anaheim's quite high. It'd probably be even higher if it didn't include the hills, but it does. But again, there are some in San Juan Capistrano. There's some in San Clemente. There's some in Yorba Linda and Brea and Los Alamitos and Cypress, some where you may not think that those communities are disinvested. There are still some census tracts there. And this is to say that this can truly be a regional thing. That's the whole point, that there are needs regionally, and that it's not just concentrated in any one area, although some areas are more intense. And so I just wanted to show you that kind of, again, this is the map, and you can, again, explore it and navigate. But there you go. I think the next tab is interesting because I think it'll probably explain even deeper by census tract. And so, yes, you have your cities, but well, where are the exact census tracts within my city or whomever you're representing? So I don't know why, there you go. So obviously there's just a kind of, you can see the dotted lines represent the city. What you see currently are just demographic breakdown. So the yellow are, Latino, Latinx communities, and obviously the darker the color, the more intense, and the red are the API community. So this isn't disaggregated. We disaggregate it in other ways. through the report, but we didn't, you don't want it to get too complicated here, but that's kind of what you're seeing. So yellow means that you have a high concentration of Latino Latinx population. Red is API, and then the white is still predominantly white populations. So there are, again, multiple definitions that the state likes to use. So as you move into here, now if you start seeing, sorry, I don't want to go too far, if you start seeing kind of these greenish blue, these are now the census tracts that by one definition or another are disinvested communities. And so this, again, you were all located in the previous map. I just showed you on that to make it easier. But as you can see, again, all these cities that have kind of color within them mean they have disinvested communities. This is with another definition that the state has. You can apply all definitions. Now you start seeing some blue. Then even if you're just blue, you technically that census tract is considered disinvested communities by the definitions given by the state. So anywhere really where there's, sorry, not the red or yellow, but any bluish or green, if there's a census tract there that you see color in, that means it's a disinvested census tract. And then this doesn't have to be the case, but it may help, is that if you could see here, we do have census tracts that essentially, meet all definitions. And these are the ones outlined in red. There doesn't have to be specific targeting of these census tracts, but it is something just to be aware of, that there are that kind of meet every definition that the state has, is considered disinvested. So this is maybe where people might more traditionally think where disinvested communities are in Orange County. But again, I think it's still regional. We don't have to define it so narrowly. We actually recommend we shouldn't. I know that there are full regions, other regions of the state. So Orange County is one region where their entire region is by definition a disinvested community. And so if you sometimes think of it too narrowly, it'll signal to the state, well, what's the value of giving some money to Orange County if they only have, by the state standards, these few census tracts that are this disinvested. And so this is why I think we still want the broader definition. And so that's why, again, if you look at the previous maps, there's just color there. So I think that's really those are the two things I really wanted to highlight going into this, because as we think about the strategies, because it impacts the projects, that the state wants these projects, I wouldn't necessarily say have to be located in disinvested communities, but needs to be of the benefit of those disinvested communities. And so I should just be aware of that even if you think, if we go back, that there's only hypothetically 5 projects or 2 or 3 projects in Orange County in that original definition, that's obviously not that can't be located everywhere. It's only 3 projects. But if there's ways that residents of your community can benefit and have access to those, regardless of its location, that's what we're looking at. And I think, a community college is a good example. There are some ways only 9. However, I'm sure that obviously people from all over Orange County access one of those 9 community colleges if they want to. And so that's going to be true as we think about the efficacy of these projects, is that there is still access from everyone within disinvested communities to get to these things and potentially benefit. And then the last slide is just, again, my contact information. I think you have it. I'll share the slide deck after. We didn't want to overwhelm too much. This is very much a high level overview. Happy to answer questions, but I just wanted to show you some things that might be able to help you with understanding surf, but 2, it might even just help you with your what you do daily. And hopefully that some of these things developed will just be helpful to you, kind of regardless of what the outcomes are of surf, because I think the state really wants just the mindset of surf to exist past itself. But again, we just hope that there are even these things are just resources that are developed for the community, and there's already benefit of that, let alone how it applies to surf. So with that, I'm going to stop share and to open up to questions. You have my contact information if you want to kind of just, again, kind of digest all that stuff. But always, again, if people have questions now, you could write it in the chat. You can just unmute yourself. This is, a smaller group. I'm happy to answer it now.
Jesse, Jerry Craig, City of Tustin. Thanks for the presentation. And I know that your slide deck will probably point to it again, but where was all that data from ESRI, I think it was?
Yeah, here, I could drop it directly in the chat.
Okay.
For everyone to get, you'll see it in the deck, but that's like all these different data sets. And then Yeah, I can. So let me just share screen one more time. If it helps you, if you want to just kind of like jump to the map, then you'll see like the disinvested, these two disinvested, the community and tracks analysis and the disinvested community web map. Those are the two tabs I showed you. But as I mentioned, clearly there's more, and it is very, as much as we can, very localized information. But that's the full, the link I sent you was the full data set. But if you wanted to jump to those two maps, it's these two things right here. But again, I welcome you to kind of explore what's of value. And we're going to put together probably an FAQ, just because I think there's, if you jump into this, there's just, you can get lost. And so maybe cannot be helpful. So we're going to develop that as well. And I'll send that to everybody if you want to, so you can kind of, this is more workable, but maybe some of you either are or have people on your team who are just kind of data wonks and gurus. And I think by all means have at it. There's that possibility as well. Any other preliminary questions? I just wonder, I wanted to spare you from reading like a 70-page SFP to fully understand SURF. Hopefully that put a lot of time back in your pocket. Yes.
Jesse, this is Marie in City of Brea. Again, like I had mentioned earlier, I was thrown into this last minute, so forgive me if I'm not familiar enough. Are we applying for these funds individually as cities through the county, or how does this work?
Yeah, so again, if the state goes more prescriptively, then, you know, again, like the HRTC, or we will all work through it collectively. So I would say no, you wouldn't have to write for, sorry, let me try to take a step back. Because I guess like the way that the state wants to pivot it almost like extends the planning and less of the actual projects, right? So if we go with what the state is probably heading towards, I don't think you're really at a phase yet where it's like city saying, I have a project in mind. Can you fund it? Because first we have to identify the industries. And then there's, if you saw, like an industry collaborative has to get built. And then those collaboratives start working through what these projects could be to benefit that industry. If it's the latter one, essentially if the state sticks with more of their original plan, then, you know, no, you could hypothetically apply individually. Yes, you hypothetically could, although I think it's always recommended the more you can do things with a broader coalition, the stronger your application will be. And we will obviously, when we send it out to all of you, not only will we have the state's final SFP, we'll also have some other complementary criteria based on the strategies that are determined. And we'll also explain the process in which we'll solicit these projects. But absolutely, any one entity could apply. I would just recommend, just by the nature of SURF, it's probably not suggested that, you know, just one entity go in on something. But you would send it to, you know, the HRTC for review. They would be the decision-making body on who ultimately gets put into our proposal to the state. And then of course it'll get kind of then, it'll be redirected to you as the local player for execution.
Got it. Thank you very much for that clarification.
But you're right, so just broadly, it's going to have to come to the HRTC first before it goes to the state. And then we submit to the state. So even what we submit to the state may decline certain aspects of it, modify certain aspects of it, because they're also working our proposal as a region compared to others. So there's a little bit of competition amongst locally, and then there's going to be competition regionally. So we can't even guarantee what you wrote will ultimately be funded or submitted will be funded, because there's just multiple layers before it gets ultimately approved. Yes, Deborah.
I saw something on there about SEDS. Is the HRTC or is SURF replacing our SEDS?
No, it doesn't necessarily have to. So no, I mean, the reason why I said was I think it helps people, especially this group, think about what this document is more so. So no, I don't think that it is mandatory automatically replacing the SEDS. I guess hypothetically it might be able to if the region wanted it to, but I just used the SEDS as an example again, just so people can kind of wrap their head around what is going to be in the report.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? And again, please, again, sit with this. You'll get the what I would call more the data aspect of this thing coming to you either on tomorrow, which would be Friday, or early next week. Again, I was just joking. Please feel free to get to it after the 4th of July, just to give you the opportunity to look at that, and then as well your opportunity to provide input into that document. And then we'll do the same thing for strategies and same things for projects. The whole point is that we want to make sure that even though the HRTC is a pretty big group, it's not fully accurate of all the different stakeholders in Orange County. And so we're trying to use these platforms in order to expand it further.
Jesse, don't forget to mention about the office hours as well.
Yeah, and so we'll send that out in the recap about other opportunities to provide input into it. Of course, writing works as well if that's easiest. You don't have to have a set time, but through the office hours, we just want to make sure that there's ample opportunity for people who are interested to provide that feedback to make this plan more inclusive and most likely better. Anything else? Questions, comments? All right, then I think I stay true to my promise and I'm getting you out early. Please enjoy the rest of your week. If I don't see you obviously before, happy 4th, everybody. Have a great time there, but be safe and take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.